Welcome to Restoria. I'm Arthur, and this is your quiet place for gentle bedtime stories. Get comfortable, take a breath, and let the story slow your thoughts and ease you softly into sleep. The Pocket Watch. The watch had been on the writing desk for some weeks now, and you had not yet decided what to do with it. It had been your grandfather's and his father's before, and possibly someone's before that. And along the outer brass of its case ran the worn places where a thumb had rubbed across many years. You had taken to looking at it in the evenings, after the rest of the house had grown hushed, when the room at the top of the stairs held only the amber circle of a single low lamp and the steady tick of an old clock somewhere down the corridor. The watch was not running. It had not run since you had been given it. Its thin hands rested at an unmoving hour somewhere between 9 and 10, and it sat on the writing desk in its plain stillness, the brass of the case glowing in the lamplight, the worn places along the rim catching the light in faint little curves. You had been told by the cousin who passed the watch on that there was a key in the velvet pouch beside it, and that the watch would run again with even winding, and that you would know when the right evening was for the winding of it. Your cousin had said this last part with a small smile that you had not entirely understood, and had not entirely needed to understand, and you had taken the watch home and set it on the writing desk and not wound it. This evening, the room at the top of the house was very warm. The day had been a cold one, and you had built a small fire in the iron stove in the corner, and the stove had taken its measured hour to heat the room, and now the heat had settled into the wood of the floor and the wood of the desk and the corduroy of the old armchair by the window. You sat at the desk in your woolen cardigan with a cup of tea cooling on a clay coaster, and your hand had drifted across the desk and come to rest beside the watch, and the watch had sat there in the lamplight, easy to look at, asking nothing. The lamp was a small brass one with a green glass shade, and it threw an amber circle of light across the desk, just wide enough to hold the cup of tea and the small notebook you had been writing in, and the pocket watch. The rest of the room lay in the deeper dusk that a single lamp leaves a room in. The corner where the iron stove burned had its own low glow, an even orange that danced faintly along the bottom of the wall behind the stove. The window above the desk held the deep blue of a winter evening, with a single bright star low on the ridgeline of roofs across the street, and beyond that star, the faint amber of a far city under a deepening sky. You picked the watch up. The brass was heated through, more than you had expected, the way old brass is heated when it has been sitting near a low lamp for an hour. Your thumb fitted itself into the worn place along the rim, the place where some other thumb had rested across many evenings, and the watch lay easily in your hand, the way old, well-loved things lie easily in any hand that knows how to hold them. You opened the cover with the careful pressure that the cover wanted. A faint click. The cover lifted on its brass hinge, and the face of the watch came into the lamplight beneath you, the white enamel slightly creamed by age, the black numerals plain and even, the thin hands resting at their unmoving hour. The key from the velvet pouch was in your other hand. You did not remember picking it up, But there it was, brass and already heated by your fingers. The key had a narrow stem and a flat head, and along the flat head ran the same worn places where some other fingers had pressed many evenings before. You fitted the head of the key into the notch at the back of the watch. The fit was easy. The fit was the kind of fit that has been made and made and made again across long years until the notch and the head of the key know each other entirely. You wound it, not all at once, easily, the way you would have wound any old watch you cared about. One turn, then another, then another. The watch began to make a low sound against the inside of its case, a low tick, faint at first, then steadier. The thin hands did not yet move. The sound found its rhythm in its own time, the way a small fire finds its rhythm when fresh wood has been laid across the embers and the first flame is just beginning to climb along the bark. You wound it a little further. The low tick steadied. The thin hands began, very evenly, to move. The minute hand crept its way across one numeral, and then another. A faint heat came up out of the watch into your palm, the kind of heat any old, well-loved thing has when it has been allowed to do the thing it was made to do. You did not want to wind the watch any further than it wanted to be wound. You felt, through the steady turning of the key, when the spring within the watch had gathered its abiding strength, and you let go of the key and set it down on the desk beside the velvet pouch. The watch ticked in your hand. The low tick filled the room very evenly, no louder than the breathing of the iron stove in the corner, no louder than the ticking of the old clock somewhere down the corridor, no louder than the abiding hum of the room itself against your face and your hands. You held the watch. You did not look at the face. You looked, instead, at the green glass shade of the lamp and the amber circle of light it threw across the desk and the low glow of the iron stove in the corner of the room. The room had grown softer at its edges. The corners had drawn in a little. The lamplight had grown a little more golden, a little more old-fashioned in its color. You did not know quite when this had happened. Perhaps the lamp had always been this color. Perhaps your eyes had only just settled into the seeing of it. The wood of the desk beneath your hand felt deeper, the grain finer, the cup of tea on its clay coaster more present in its wisp of rising steam. You closed your eyes. The low tick of the watch went on in your palm. An even pull came up beneath the tick, the way the easy pull of a tide comes up beneath the surface of a hushed pond when the moon has begun, in some unhurried way, to rise above the trees. You let it pull. You did not resist it. You did not lean into it. You only let it. When you opened your eyes, the room was a different room. It was a kitchen, low-ceilinged, with a long, scrubbed wooden table running down its center, and a wide, white sink along its far wall, and a narrow row of windows above the sink that looked out into a deep summer garden. The light through the windows was the honeyed gold of late summer evening, the kind of gold that comes off the sun when it is already low along a hill, but has not yet begun to go down, the kind of gold that turns every wooden surface in a room into something close to honey itself. The kitchen smelled of bread and of butter, and of an even stewing pot of something on the back of the stove, and beneath all of that, the clean smell of a room where a careful hand had wiped the wooden surfaces with a cloth. You stood near the doorway. You did not remember coming through the door. You did not need to remember. You were here, in the kitchen, in the honeyed gold of the late summer evening, and the kitchen was the kind of kitchen that had been a part of you long before you had been a part of any kitchens of your own. A clock ticked on a shelf above the back door. A small black cat slept on a folded blanket on the wooden chair near the stove, his front paws tucked neatly beneath his chest, his round body rising and falling with the abiding rhythm of his sleeping breath. A grandmother stood at the wide white sink. Her back was to you. She wore a pale blue cotton dress and a long white apron tied at her waist, and her grey hair was pinned up at the back of her head in the careful way that hair gets pinned up at the end of a long day in a kitchen. She was washing a handful of strawberries in a wide enamel bowl, and the strawberries shone deep red in the honey light, and the water in the bowl had taken on a faint pink colour, and her hands moved over the strawberries with the abiding care that comes to hands that have washed many strawberries across many summers. She did not turn to greet you. She did not need to. She knew you were there in the way that a grandmother knows a grandchild is there, the way an abiding heat knows another abiding heat has come into the room beside it. "Sit down," she said, without turning, her voice as low as the gold light through the window above the sink. "There's bread, there's butter, there's the strawberries when I'm done with them. The kettle's on." You sat down at the long, scrubbed wooden table. The table had been scrubbed so many times across so many years that the wood had taken on a pale glow, the kind of glow that wood only takes on after a great deal of careful washing. Along the center of the table, a handful of wildflowers stood in a clear glass jar of water, the stems leaning easily to one side, the white and yellow heads of the flowers lit from above by the gold light. A loaf of bread sat at the far end of the table on a wooden board, half cut, the cut side turned away from the air to keep it tender. A dish of butter, the color of pale gold, stood beside the bread. A clay pot of honey sat beside the butter, its wooden spoon resting along its rim. The chair beneath you was a wooden one with a cushion tied to its seat. The cushion had been made many years ago by some careful hand, sewn from squares of cotton in faded colors, and stuffed with the kind of dry filling that gives easily to a person's weight, without ever quite flattening. The chair fitted you the way it had always fitted you. The cushion held you the way it had always held you. The honey light from the window above the sink fell across the wood of the table, and across the back of your hand, and across the cushion beneath you. And the heat of the light was the same heat as the heat of the watch had been against your palm. Your grandmother carried the wide enamel bowl of washed strawberries to the table and set it down in the center. She moved without hurry. Her steps were even on the wooden floor. She wiped her hands on her white apron in the careful way that hands get wiped at the end of a small task, And then she sat down at the chair across from you, and the small black cat on the folded blanket near the stove gave an even stretch in his sleep, and the kettle on the back of the stove began to make its first hiss of coming up to its boil. She did not say anything. She did not need to. The kitchen said all the things that needed to be said, in the unhurried language of bread and gold light and the low tick of the clock above the back door and the breathing of the cat on his folded blanket. She reached across the table and slid the breadboard a little nearer to you, and pushed the dish of butter beside it, and turned the clay pot of honey so that the wooden spoon faced your hand. Her hand on the wood of the table was an old hand, the kind of hand that has worked across many summers and many winters. The bones of the fingers slightly knotted at the knuckles, the skin gathered into the abiding creases that long use leaves on any well-loved tool. You broke a piece from the loaf. The crust was thick and pale, the inside tender and faintly sweet. Steam rose from the torn middle, and the steam carried the scent of fresh bread, and the smell rose up to your face and settled there for a moment before lifting away. You spread a piece of the pale gold butter on the bread with the side of a wooden knife. The butter melted into the heat of the bread without your having to wait for it. You took an even small bite. The bread was so good that you did not need to say anything about it being so good. Your grandmother watched you with the contented look of a person who had fed a person she loves many times across many years, and she nodded once, very small, the kind of nod that says only that the bread had come out as it was meant to come out. The kettle on the back of the stove had begun to murmur. Not yet whistling, just murmuring. The murmur a kettle makes when it is just beginning to come up to its boil. Your grandmother rose and lifted the kettle off the ring and poured the hot water into a brown teapot that had been waiting on the wooden tray beside the stove. The scent of tea began to come up out of the teapot, the kind of tea smell that fills a kitchen the way the scent of a low fire fills a winter room, settling along the wooden surfaces, soaking into the cotton of the curtains, becoming part of the kitchen as much as the gold light or the tick of the clock. She brought the teapot to the table and set it down on a woven mat. She brought 2 clay cups and set them down at her place and at yours. The cups were old, their glaze slightly crazed with the pale lines of long years of use, and they fitted into the hands the way old, well-loved cups fit into hands that have held them many times across many summers. She poured the tea into your cup and into hers, and the sound of the pouring filled the kitchen for an unhurried while, and beneath the pouring, the tick of the clock above the back door went on, and the breathing of the small black cat on his folded blanket went on, and the honeyed gold light from the window above the sink went on across the wood of the table and across the back of your hand. You held the cup in both your hands. The clay was heated through. The scent of the tea rose up to your face, even and old and pleasing. You took a small sip. The tea was good. It was the kind of good that does not need any thinking about. The heat went a careful way down into your chest and stayed there, the way the heat of a well-tended fire stays in a winter room long after the wood has been laid carefully across the embers. Through the row of windows above the sink, The deep summer garden lay in the honey gold of the late evening. A wooden gate stood at the end of a stone path, and beyond the gate ran a low hedge, and beyond the hedge stretched an open field that climbed evenly up the long curve of a hill. The hill was cut across, here and there, by the dark lines of the hedgerows, and along the highest part of the hill stood a single tall tree, its long shape mellow against the gold of the sky. A pair of swallows turned and turned in the air above the field, in the easy patterns that swallows make in the late summer evenings, dipping low and rising again, dipping low and rising again. Never quite the same line twice. A breeze came in through the open kitchen window. It carried the scent of cut grass and of distant honeysuckle along some far wall, and of the faint dust of a long day on a country road. The white and yellow flowers in the glass jar at the center of the table leaned a fraction toward the breeze, then leaned back. The cat on his folded blanket gave an even stretch in his sleep, his back paw uncurling and curling again, the pink pads of his paw faint against the blanket for a moment before he tucked them back in. You ate the bread evenly. You drank the tea evenly. Your grandmother ate too, in the careful way she had always eaten, breaking pieces of bread, dipping them in the dish of honey, lifting her cup of tea to her mouth between bites. She did not speak. You did not speak. The kitchen did the speaking, in its hushed language of bread and gold light and the tick of the clock above the back door. The strawberries in the wide enamel bowl shone deep red between you, beaded with the clear drops of the rinsing water, the gold light catching in those small drops and turning each one for a moment into a tiny mirror. After a while, your grandmother slid the bowl of strawberries a little closer to you. You took one. The fruit was cool against your fingertip, faintly damp from the water, the green leafy cap brushing against the side of your palm. You ate it without hurry. The taste of the strawberry came up sweet and heated and faintly of summer dust, the way strawberries from a country garden taste in the long evenings of late summer. And the heat of the kitchen and the heat of the bread and the heat of the tea folded together with the sweetness of the strawberry into a single ease that filled your mouth and your chest, and the cradle beneath your collarbone, where you held all the easiness of the room. The honey gold light through the window above the sink had begun to deepen toward a faint rose. The shadows in the corners of the kitchen had begun to climb each other. The hill beyond the low hedge had begun to take on the deep blue of the early dusk along its eastern shoulder, while its western edge still held the honey gold of the falling sun. The pair of swallows had been joined by a third, and then a fourth, and the easy patterns of their turning had grown a little more elaborate in the deepening air. Your grandmother rose in the way she had always risen, and crossed to the iron stove and lifted the lid of the small stewing pot. A cloud of heated steam rose up. The scent of the stew was the kind of scent that has been built up across a long afternoon, the abiding aroma of onions and carrots and a piece of meat and a handful of dried herbs from the bunch hanging upside down at the corner of the kitchen. She gave the stew a stir with a wooden spoon. looked at it for a moment with the contented look of a person who has built a careful good thing across the long afternoon, and laid the lid back over the pot. She came back to the table and sat down again, across from you. The small black cat on his folded blanket woke evenly, the way cats wake in the gold of a heated summer evening, his eyes opening halfway and stretching once, his front paws straight out before him, the pads of his paws faint and pink for a moment before he gathered them back beneath his chest. He looked at you across the kitchen with the regard that small black cats give to people they've known for a long time, and then he yawned, and his pink tongue curled once, and his eyes closed back into sleep. You sat at the table for a long while. The kettle had grown hushed on the back of the stove. The clock above the back door went on with its tick. The honey gold light through the window above the sink deepened toward a deeper rose, and then a darker amber, and then a low blue at the upper edge. The hill beyond the low hedge took on the deeper dark of the dusk along its eastern shoulder. The pair of swallows finished their easy patterns and disappeared into some far hedgerow, and the unhurried evening came down across the long curve of the field. After a long while, your grandmother stood, in the way she had always risen, and went to the back door of the kitchen and opened it, and the heated air of the deep summer evening came in. The kitchen filled with the scent of cut grass and distant honeysuckle and the faint dust of a long day on a country road. She held the door open with one hand and looked out into the garden for an unhurried while, and then she looked back at you and nodded once, very small, the kind of nod that says only that the evening had come on as it was meant to come on. "Come and sit a little outside," she said. "The bench is heated through." You followed her out into the garden. The stone path was heated through beneath your bare feet, the kind of heat that long flat stones hold all afternoon and give back in the long evenings. The garden was small, with a low stone wall along its far side and a single old apple tree near the gate, and along the wall there was a wooden bench painted faded green, the paint dulled from many summers of mild weather. A wooden shed stood at the far corner of the garden, its door slightly open, the dim shape of garden tools just visible inside. The honeysuckle along the low stone wall had begun to give up its heavy scent into the heated evening air, and somewhere beyond the wall a single bird sang a few notes and was hushed again. You sat down on the green bench beside your grandmother. The wood of the bench was heated through, the kind of heat that wood holds in summer when the sun has been on it all afternoon, and it came up through the cotton of your trousers and settled along the back of your legs. The apple tree near the gate held the honey gold of the late sun along its upper leaves, and the green apples among the leaves caught the light here and there, each one a small, mellow point of late summer. A white moth turned in the air above the gate, in easy circles, the kind of easy circles that white moths make in the gold of summer evenings. The unhurried evening went on. The honey gold of the light deepened toward dim amber, and the dim amber toward deep rose, and the deep rose toward the blue of the early dusk. The single bright star you had seen earlier on the ridgeline of roofs in the room at the top of the house had appeared again here, above the long dark line of the hill across the field, and its light was a low white, no longer the bright clean white of a winter star, but the mellow white of a summer one, half veiled by the heated air. A few smaller stars had begun to come out beside it. They came up one by one, evenly, the way unhurried things come up in unhurried evenings. The honeysuckle along the low stone wall went on giving up its heavy scent. The single bird sang again, 2 even notes, and was hushed. Far off, somewhere down in the curve of the valley, a dog barked once, the kind of easy bark that means only that some farmer has come home for his evening meal, and the bark was answered by another dog further off, and then everything was hushed again. The small black cat appeared at the kitchen door, paused a moment to consider the garden with his even regard, and then walked across the heated stones of the path and leaped lightly onto the green bench beside you. He turned an even circle, settled himself with his round body against your thigh, and began to purr. The purr was a low engine of abiding heat. It came up through the round body of the cat and settled against your thigh and travelled up into the cradle beneath your collarbone, where you held all the ease of the evening. You let your hand rest along his back. The fur was heated, downy, faintly dusted from a long day in the garden. Your fingers moved evenly along his back, in the easy way fingers move when they have stopped trying to do anything in particular. The cat's purr deepened. The heat of him grew against your thigh. The heated air of the evening moved across the garden. The white moth turned its easy circles above the gate. The single bird sang its 2 notes once more and was hushed. The blue of the early dusk deepened toward the blue of true evening, and along the dimming sky the small stars came up one by one, evenly, the way unhurried things come up in unhurried evenings. Your grandmother sat beside you on the green bench, her hands folded in her lap, her face mellow in the deepening blue. She did not speak. You did not speak. The garden did the speaking, in the hushed language of honeysuckle and blue dusk and the easy circles of the white moth above the gate. After a long while, the lights of a far village began to show along the curve of the valley below the hill. They came up one by one, low and amber, each window holding its own brief story for a moment in the deep blue dusk. A low lamp came on in the wooden shed at the far corner of the garden, where some neighbor had stepped in for a moment to fetch a tool, and the dim glow from the open door of the shed lay along the heated stones of the path in a long, pale wedge. The heated air of the evening went on moving across the garden. The honeysuckle went on giving up its heavy scent. The cat went on purring against your thigh. Your hand went on moving evenly along his back, in the easy way that hands move when they have stopped trying to do anything in particular. You did not need to think. You did not need to remember. The evening did the remembering for you. The kitchen behind you, the bread, the gold light through the window above the sink, the clay teapot, the wide enamel bowl of strawberries, the tick of the clock above the back door, the breathing of the small black cat on his folded blanket, the honey gold deepening toward dim amber and deep rose and blue, the green bench, the heated stones of the path, the honeysuckle along the low stone wall, the white moth turning its easy circles above the gate. All of it was being remembered around you by the long abiding patience of the evening itself, and you only needed to sit at the center of the remembering and let it remember you back. The first fireflies came out along the low hedge at the far side of the garden. They came up one by one, small green sparks of pale light drifting in easy patterns above the long dark line of the hedge. Each spark would come up, drift a small distance, fade, and come up again somewhere a little further along. The easy patterns of the small sparks moved across the long dark line of the hedge like the unhurried thoughts of a mellow summer evening, and you watched them for a long unhurried while, and your hand went on moving evenly along the back of the cat, and the cat went on purring against your thigh, and your grandmother sat beside you on the green bench, her hands folded in her lap, her face mellow in the deepening blue. The sparks of the fireflies grew more numerous along the hedge. They drifted up a small way into the heated air of the garden and turned in easy patterns above the apple tree and along the low stone wall and above the green bench where you were sitting. One came up very near you, paused for a moment in the air just beside the cat's dark ear, and drifted away again, as if it had recognized you and had wished to make sure you had recognized it back. The spark of its light moved on across the garden and joined the easy patterns of the others, and the patterns went on, even and easy and abiding. The blue of the evening deepened toward the deep blue of true night. The lights of the far village glowed along the curve of the valley. The low lamp from the wooden shed went out, and the dim wedge of pale light along the heated stones of the path went out with it, and the dark shape of the neighbor walked back to his own gate and disappeared into the dusk. The cat had grown heavier against your thigh. His round body had taken on the deep weight of true sleep, and his low purr had become an abiding hum, the kind of abiding hum that small black cats make when they have settled themselves against a person they have known for a long time and have decided that the person is not going to move for a while. Your grandmother did not move. You did not move. You did not move. The sparks of the fireflies drifted in easy patterns above the long dark line of the hedge. The tick of the clock above the back door of the kitchen went on, very faintly, just barely audible through the open back door across the heated air of the garden. The unhurried evening went on. The unhurried evening had become the unhurried night. The unhurried night went on into the unhurried turning of the world. After a long, unhurried while, your grandmother spoke. Her voice was as low as the gold light had been earlier, through the window above the sink. "Come along now," she said. "It's time for bed." She rose in the way she had always risen and held out her hand to you. You took the hand. The hand was heated through, the bones of the fingers slightly knotted at the knuckles, the skin gathered into the creases of long use. The cat slid off your thigh, made an even stretch, and walked back toward the kitchen door, his dark tail held up in the easy way of a cat who knows where he is going. You followed your grandmother back across the heated stones of the path. The kitchen was very dim now. The honey gold light through the windows above the sink had become the deep blue of true evening. A single small candle burned on the long, scrubbed wooden table beside the handful of wildflowers in the clear glass jar. The tick of the clock above the back door went on, steady, abiding, old, and the kettle on the back of the stove had grown hushed. The stewing pot had been set aside off the heat, its lid laid carefully across its top, the heated scent of it still mellow along the wooden surfaces of the kitchen. Your grandmother led you up a narrow wooden staircase to a low-ceilinged room at the top of the house. The room had a single bed beneath a sloping ceiling, a wooden chair beside the bed, a wooden shelf above the chair, and a single round window in the gable wall that looked out over the dusk of the garden and the long dark line of the hedge and the sparks of the fireflies drifting in their easy patterns. The bed was made up with a thick quilt. The colors of the quilt faded by the mild weather of many summers, the careful patches of the quilt sewn by some careful hand many evenings before. A candle burned on the wooden shelf above the chair. The candle threw an amber glow across the quilt and across the pillow and across the round window in the gable wall. You climbed into the bed. The quilt was heated, the kind of warmth that a quilt has when it has been laid on a bed for a while in an upper room of a country house in the heated summer. The pillow was firm beneath the cotton case. The mattress beneath you settled into your shape, the way a long-used mattress settles into the shape of any body that has lain on it many evenings before. Your grandmother drew the quilt up to your shoulders. She laid her heated hand for a moment along the side of your face. She did not speak. She only looked at you, with the look of a person who has loved another person for a long time, and then she rose and walked to the wooden shelf above the chair and blew the candle out. The room was filled with the dim blue of the evening. The round window in the gable wall held a piece of the deepening sky, with 2 or 3 stars in it, and the sparks of the fireflies still drifting in easy patterns above the long dark line of the hedge below. Your grandmother stood for an unhurried while in the doorway, her shape mellow against the deeper dark of the staircase behind her, and then she turned and walked back down the narrow wooden stairs, and the steps of her descent went on for a moment and faded into the hush of the kitchen below. You lay on your back beneath the quilt. The quilt was heated. The pillow was firm beneath your cheek. The mattress had taken your shape. The round window in the gable wall held the dim blue of the evening, and the small stars, and the easy patterns of the fireflies along the long dark line of the hedge below. You let your eyes close. The dim blue of the evening moved along the inside of your eyelids, mellow as heated water. The tick of the clock above the back door of the kitchen below went on, very faintly, just barely audible through the floor of the upper room. The hum of the cat, who had followed your grandmother back into the kitchen and settled himself once more on his folded blanket near the stove, came up very faintly through the floor as well, the abiding hum of a small animal at rest. You breathed in the mild scent of the upper room, the scent of the quilt and the pillow and the long-used mattress. The scent beneath all of those of the unhurried evening of the country house in the heated summer. You breathed out. Your shoulders eased deeper into the pillow. Your hands rested at your sides. Your eyes had closed without your having to close them. The fireflies kept on. The stars kept on. The tick of the clock kept on. The hum of the cat kept on. The mild scent of the upper room kept on. The dim blue of the evening kept on, deepening very evenly toward the dim blue of the long abiding night. You drifted. You were held. The bed held you. The room held you. The country house held you. The unhurried evening held the country house, and the unhurried night held the unhurried evening, and the unhurried turning of the world held the unhurried night. A long, unhurried while passed. You drifted further. The pull beneath the tick of the watch had become the pull of the unhurried evening itself, and you were no longer sure where one ended and the other began. A piece of heat in your palm, where the watch lay against your hand, came back to you very evenly. You did not open your eyes. The heat was a low heat, the kind that any old, well-loved thing has when it has been allowed to do the thing it was made to do. You drifted. You came back. You drifted again. Each time you came back, the upper room of the country house was a little dimmer, and the quilt was a little more heated, and the dim blue of the evening was a little deeper. Each time you came back, the heat in your palm was a little mellower. Each time you came back, the tick of the clock above the back door of the kitchen below was a little more even. The upper room held you. The quilt held you. The country house held you. The unhurried evening of the heated summer held the country house, and the unhurried night held the unhurried evening, and the unhurried turning of the world held the unhurried night, and the abiding heat in your palm held all of it, very evenly, very lightly, asking nothing. You drifted again, and this time you did not come back so quickly. The heat in your palm had become the same as the heat of the quilt across your shoulders. The tick of the clock above the back door of the kitchen below had become the same as the abiding beat of the long evening itself. The upper room of the country house had become the same as the room at the top of the other house, with the green-shaded lamp and the iron stove burning evenly in the corner, and the writing desk by the window, and the two rooms had folded themselves together along their dim edges, and you rested at the center of both of them. You did not need to choose. You did not need to look. The two rooms held you between them, even and heated and abiding. The quilt was the same as the woolen cardigan. The honey gold of the late summer evening was the same as the amber light of the green-shaded lamp. The tick of the watch in your palm was the same as the tick of the clock above the back door of the country kitchen, and the tick of the clock was the same as the hum of the iron stove in the room at the top of the other house. All of it was one long abiding heat, and the heat held you and the heat was being kept by something kinder than time. The fireflies along the hedge went on with their easy patterns. The small stars in the round gable window went on with their dim procession. The tick of the watch went on in your palm. The hum of the cat on his folded blanket near the kitchen stove went on very faintly through the floor of the upper room. You breathed in. You breathed out. The whole evening breathing for you. The upper room held you. The quilt held you. The country house held you. The unhurried evening held the country house. The unhurried night held the unhurried evening. The tick of the watch in your palm held all of it, even and steady and old. You drifted. You were held. The abiding heat of the long evening filled the room around you, hearth by quilt, by pillow, by window. Your shoulders eased deeper into the pillow. Your hands rested. The tick of the watch in your palm grew evener, the way an unhurried breath grows evener when sleep has begun to come down. Far below, the tick of the clock above the back door of the kitchen went on. The hum of the cat went on. The heated air of the heated summer evening went on, moving across the garden, over the long dark line of the hedge, between the easy patterns of the fireflies, beneath the dim procession of the stars in the deep blue sky. The unhurried turning of the world went on. The unhurried turning of the world was old. The unhurried turning of the world had been turning for a long time. The unhurried turning of the world would go on turning for a long time more. You were held. You were carried. You did not need to do anything with the holding or with the carrying. You only needed to lie under the quilt and let the unhurried evening do the holding, and the unhurried night do the carrying, and the tick of the watch in your palm do the keeping of the long heat between them. You drifted further. The upper room grew dimmer. The quilt grew heated. The dim blue of the evening grew deeper. The tick of the watch in your palm grew evener. The hum of the cat grew lower. The unhurried evening grew longer and longer until it had become the same thing as the unhurried turning of the night around the unhurried turning of the world. You slept beneath the quilt of the upper room. You slept beneath the cardigan of the room at the top of the other house. The two rooms held you between them, even and heated and abiding, and the heat went on, very evenly, very lightly, asking nothing of you, giving everything quietly back. The watch ticked very evenly in your palm. The fireflies turned very evenly above the long dark line of the hedge. The stars went on very evenly in the dim procession across the small piece of sky in the round gable window. You slept